Welcome to this week's edition of People Over Politics. As you know, this is a pre-recording, and it is now 4:20. So with that being said, I wanted to introduce the next guest. She is a boss in the cannabis industry and a dynamic young woman that everybody should meet. And her name is Jane West. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been watching a lot of your podcast. You've got some amazing guests on and covering really the important topics out there.
Sure. I mean, I want to remind everybody that this is not a cannabis show, but, I am the cannabis councilman, and cannabis, happens to be one of my favorite topics. Right. So, Jane, for people who don't know about you, of course, I know about you. I'm a big advocate in the community. Tell people about what you do and, why you came to cannabis and the cannabis community.
Yes. Well, I've been a cannabis lover my whole life. I always preferred it over alcohol. And at the dawn of adult use, so we're talking 2013, as a 38-year-old mother of two, I have a master's degree in social work and living in Denver, Colorado. And when it became clear that we were going to legalize and any adult could walk into a store with an ID and buy cannabis, I thought for sure there should be cannabis events. And my background had been in running large nonprofit events. And so I put together a cannabis event series. And our first event, End of Prohibition, on January 24th, 2014, was a huge success. We got a ton of press. And as a result, I made it to the 5:00 evening news with Brian Williams. And from that one media hit, I was asked to resign from my job the next day. And that was a company I'd worked for 8 years. And that became a pretty big news story that you could be in, an ancillary to cannabis and lose your job. So I kept going all in with doing cannabis events. That summer, I partnered with the Colorado Symphony Orchestra. And we did, on a high note, an event series where from cannabis companies, we raised over $250,000 for local arts. But the mayor of Denver was not having it and sent a SWAT team to one of my events. I was left with criminal misdemeanor charges and a 1.5 year probation of hosting anything or being related to cannabis in any way. Well, as a result of all the things I just described to you, which did make the cover of the Denver Post. There's several articles in New York Times. I was one of the most widely recognized women in the cannabis sector, and women were reaching out to me from all over the world. Like, how do I get into the industry? How do I want to do what you're doing? And this was, again, just Colorado and Washington were the only states that legalized. And so I founded Women Grow. That really kind of went back to my social work roots and the type of organizing I had been doing. And so we founded Women Grow. We gathered women together on a state-by-state level because, the regulations in each state are what determine who gets licenses and who gets to win and who gets to make what, when, where. And so we organized women on a state-by-state level. Hundreds of thousands of people have attended Women Grow events to date. I worked on it for 2 years straight and then hired up the next generation of staff. Women Grow is now 80% Black female owned. And in 2017, I went off on my own to start really focusing on the Jane West brand and designing products and product lines that I wanted to see in the market.
Wow. That was a mouthful. But it's great things. And, I've met you at I got to get some background at the National Cannabis Festival.
Yeah.
So since then, I met you, and I think initially I was like, wow, she's a boss, because I saw all the different products. Plus I saw the vision a long time ago. So you've been in, this business, you've been growing, with the business as we've been expanding into different states and different countries as well. So I definitely applaud you for that. And just to be clear, in the name Women Grow, it's not just about cultivation. There's also the dispensary aspect, the processing aspect, and anything else, right? Like marketing and stuff like that, right?
Definitely. And, there's a lot of women that are flipping their existing careers into cannabis. And that has a lot to do with education and community outreach and, re-educating people about this plant. And so women really are a great portal for that. And people trust and listen to them about these different products, especially when you're looking for the right thing for your child or your grandparents. And I think a lot of women are playing that role as well. Yeah, Cannabis really has no limits when you also take into account everything that could happen with hemp. And so that's why it's so frustrating to see how many limits there are out there to actually start a business or be in the space. And so that's why I continue to play such a strong advocacy role, because the future of cannabis that's unfolding right now is not what I had envisioned 8 years ago.
For sure. I mean, absolutely. Somebody asked a question to some Marylanders, I think a couple months ago, on how they think Maryland's doing, in comparison to where they've come from. And I think their answer kind of to the extent was, it may be a little bit better, but there's still not equity, and we don't see equity being achieved.
Right.
With organizations like Women Grow and Freedom Grow, and there's several organizations that advocate. Have you seen an increase in minority, especially women ownership in the industry?
No, I've seen a notable decrease, in fact. And just a slight segue, like in Colorado, under Amendment 64, the longest standing legalization initiative in place, the market grows every year and there's opportunity for all. Now, I'm not saying that there's a lot of female-owned businesses or Black-owned businesses in Colorado right now, but I'm saying that you could go to the Department of Med and get a license and try to start a cannabis business. And that is, with Amendment 64 and thousands of medical cultivators, thousands of rec cultivators, hundreds of dispensaries across Colorado. I mean, Colorado is the same population as just the city of Los Angeles, and all of those licenses have been able to be issued, and the vast majority of them are independently owned by Colorado natives that started businesses. So, that seeing cannabis legalization go that direction firsthand in Colorado was what gave me so much energy. And I was naive at the time, being like, oh my gosh, women's outdated, uneducated stereotypes about cannabis are going to prevent them from starting businesses at exactly the time they need to. Mm-hmm. And so that was a lot of the original motivation behind Women Grow. Learn about the business. I knew women that owned dispensaries, owned cultivations, owned a lab, owned a processing facility. And so to show the rest of the nation, hey, this is just the beginning of the opportunities that are out there. And then to see these limited markets come into play, and to see multi-state operators and their lobbyists controlling the way legalization occurs, to the point that I feel wrong telling people there's still opportunity out there in a lot of states. And so that's been one of the most disheartening things to me, because it is a plant, and it's a plant that we all know it's not that hard to grow. What's making it hard is the red tape. What's making it hard is all the barriers being put in place to allow everyday people to start local businesses and in the cannabis sector. And so watching this unfold, and watching state after state just accept, oh, there's a lottery now. Oh, this application, and it costs me thousands of dollars, and I need 12 lawyers. And that's not necessary. That's just what is being put in place to prevent others from access.
So just to segue, there's 2 points out, two things that I would point out. You mentioned, of course, some of the women owners. I know Hope Wiseman in my state was one of the first one and the youngest one, and I believe she co-owns with her mom and the friend of theirs. But definitely Black owned. Also, I've been visiting a lot of dispensaries, a lot of grows, a lot of cultivation sites, because I think that before getting into the business, you should have all these different. You should know all these different aspects. I understand the lobbying side, because I spent years on that side, and I still do that. But I had to get more firsthand experience. So I've been visiting, and one of the common themes that I found is it's either been ex-law enforcement or ex-finance industry.
Yep.
I don't know if these two industries got the scoop beforehand, But that's one of the things that I see, and the law enforcement, I definitely question them, because from their perspective, it was like you criminalize people from this, but then you saw the financial gain. And I've always tell the police officers that I'm close to that when THC becomes federally legal, most of the force will do it because they have pain. They go through things like everybody else. But of course, this is not federally legal and not legal in their state. They're not allowed to take part in that. So yeah, I mean the 2 points were law enforcement and finance in the industry.
No, you're absolutely right, and arguably, those are the two groups of individuals that have the least amount of knowledge of how to grow and sell cannabis. Most boards of publicly traded cannabis companies and large multi-state operators are mostly finance people who are just looking at numbers on the paper. And you're absolutely right about law enforcement seeming to get a fairly unusual percentage of licenses in a lot of these oncoming states. For me, it's just appalling the way this keeps unfolding, because it was just 10 years ago, let's say 10 years ago, 2012, before any state had actually made that first step to sell recreational cannabis, that the whole country was convinced that all of the cannabis was coming from gangs and Black communities and destroying our communities, and they were the only ones growing and messed with. Like, we just, in a second ago, like, I think about Cops being the longest running American reality show, and all we did was watch the war on drugs play out on our televisions.
I was gonna say, I didn't know Cops ended. I thought it was still.
They brought it back. They did end it.
They did bring it back. They did bring it back. Okay, so that's what happened. So of course,
we were convinced as a nation that all of this vile drug was coming out of the exact same communities that are fighting right now to simply have the right to open a dispensary and grow a plant in their local communities. And then additionally, as I've watched all of this, I mean, it's bullshit. These social equity programs come to reality. I was there in 2017 and 2018 in Illinois when I was being told that it was going to be the most equitable cannabis law in the nation and a model for everyone to follow. And right now, there's no dispensaries in Black and brown neighborhoods. They're all in mini malls out in the burbs. There's no major cultivation that's not owned by generationally wealthy white men. That is the entire Illinois cannabis sector. And still to this day, they're fighting over the breadcrumbs of micro licenses and dispensary storefronts that they were promised. And if any of these social equity initiatives that people talk about were real, I'd be able to rattle off some Black-owned businesses or some woman-owned businesses that are actually out there as success stories for people to model their businesses after, and I can't. We got Hope. I also do business with Quasi Johnson at Jova Wellness, real close to DC. But, for my approach, as we started bringing actually Jane West branded cannabis to market, I'm not partnering with the multi-state operators, and I'm not partnering with the rich white guys. And the saddest thing is that there's 6 states that I can't even, there's not one partner that qualifies if you're going to follow my rules, because they've got it all locked up already. And so if any of this was actually working in any state, we should be able to point to some successful business owners, and we still can't.
Jane, you hit on so much. So very quickly, I want to know, I mean, to be honest, we could be here all day and talk about cannabis.
No, yeah.
But so one of the things I wanted to hit on very briefly, you guys, Amendment 24 came before the California prop, or?
Oh yeah, Amendment 64 is you're right. The number 64 is also used in California for an important proposition. But yes, no, Amendment 64 was passed and approved by Colorado voters in 2013, maybe 2012. And then they had a year to go into place. And then on January 1st, 2014, about 20 dispensaries opened their doors to long lines and started selling flower to to adults with just showing an ID. And I remember being there and how many different business owners who believed that the feds were coming and everyone was going to get shut down. And there's no way this is going to be able to go forward. And, but, you know, we did keep building. And I think it had a lot of Colorado's success and the fact that it remains something that is at least like locally owned in many cases is because it's so small. Like there's as many people live in Colorado who live in LA. And when you bring together that many decision makers and stakeholders, even people that didn't want it to happen, to the table and find a consensus to make the rules to move forward, that, you know, that's how you create like a pretty robust type of legislation that, you know, we build from every year, and the Colorado market grows every year. I think the pricing is pretty standard. We're not seeing the wide, vast fluctuations that you see in other states. And it's because the other states are controlled by completely manipulated markets.
Sure. I agree. We're in 2022. I'm someone at the end of 2021, I visited Colorado. I had the pleasure, you know, and hopefully many more trips. But I heard in the legislature, you know, since 2016, 2017, you know, in Maryland, when we were trying to pass this law, how they fearmonger people with don't be like Colorado. We don't want to be like Colorado. And the reason, let me go back. The reason they were saying this is because initially when it first started, it was an oversaturated market. So a lot of the times, you know, you had to contract cultivators and what's in there to meet the demand, you know, of the businesses in the state. But I think now it balances itself out pretty much. Like, you know, I went there and there's more dispensaries than there are Starbucks.
Correct.
You know, there's also a huge craft beer market. So like craft beer and cannabis, a lot of times, you know, their boom goes hand in hand. But one thing that I did see is in Colorado, y'all, you have to be a Colorado medical patient to visit Colorado medical dispensaries. So sometimes you have a medical dispensary upstairs and a rec dispensary downstairs, you know, operating completely separate. But, you know, the thought is, I think at both of the places, there's an educational component. If you're talking to the bud tenders or if you're talking to the bud tenders, asking them questions, there's an educational component. And I think that that's important because when we talk about the medical, recreational, adult use, to me personally, I think it's all medical and therapeutic, you know, but there should be an educational component, you know, to it. So that was really what I had to say about Colorado. But, you know, the question I have for you is, what does social equity look like? Because I always have the conversation with, you know, people that scream equity, equity, equity. Well, what does equity look like? You know, how do we define equity in the legislation, right? And then the second thing was, what vehicle do you advocate for the money to come back to the local communities? Some people advocate it goes to a fund. Some people advocate it goes to the county. Some people advocate it goes back to the state. I advocate it goes directly back to the municipalities, cities, and if not the cities, the county government, because they're closer to the people than, you know, the state or some fund. And then my last question was, what state did it right? I think Jersey has some things we could look at. So we're talking about, what does social equity look like? How do you define it? What state did it right? And, you know, what vehicle would you put it in as far as to come back to the local community?
So I feel like the term social equity is overused, and it's also so subjective. I mean, you're asking me what my definition is, what your definition is, and other people. I try my best, and I learned a lot about this in social work school. I just talk about disparity. There's a disparity that there's no Black-owned cultivations in like 7 states. So obviously there's some disparity there because it's all owned by rich white guys. And so if we keep just talking about the data, the actual information about who really owns it and the population of that state and how there should be more equality, there should be more parity, there should be like cannabis is for everyone. And it does not take that much to grow it. It's running a cannabis cultivation is no different if you're doing it in a greenhouse setting than making basil. And the fact that we have convinced so many applicants and people who are interested in being cultivators that it's just way out of their league and it's way too expensive and you could never do it on your own. That's not true. And so
you convinced me. You said, don't think small, because, the cultivation, that's that high risk, high reward. And, there's no Black cultivator in the state of Maryland that I know.
Nope.
Process.
One guy I was talking to a guy named Reggie Alston for a while, but I don't know. I don't know what the deal is with, like, because that's what I do. I just go to state after state and try to find anybody that's not like the rich white guys. And like, it's not that I have a problem with white guys. I married one, my dad's one, my brother's one. I made 2 more of them. I have a problem with disparity. And I have an even bigger problem with the fact that this is so easy to do. And I know there's a lot of people out there telling you it's not easy, but it is actually to grow cannabis. In fact, 20 years ago and then beyond, it was all done in some criminal nature and it certainly, and also it was all sold the same way. So when medical operators that are owned by massive publicly traded companies are convincing lobbyists, or their lobbyists are convincing legislators that, oh, we should be the ones doing it and it's all for medical. At the end of the day, we are all still selling baggies of dried flower. That is still the number one product. That is still the same form factor. It's the same product that people are sitting in jail for right now. And it's simply not that hard to grow. And also versus all other sectors like tech and actual true pharma, or even trying to start a craft beer company, right? Cannabis can be easy. It's something that you start in a greenhouse, and your customers, they come in and they buy it. And then a couple weeks later, they want more and they're going to come back for more. And a lot of that happens on a geographically local level. And that's what's happening in every state because we still don't have interstate transport. So the idea that you can build a local brand with your local dispensary filled with the flower that was grown in your neighborhood is completely feasible. The only thing preventing it from happening right now are the rules and regulations put in place and the limited licensing system preventing anyone from doing it because of an arbitrary piece of paper that they just made up.
And I want to talk about your business and crowdfunding, but I wanted to give people an overview on Maryland. What we have right now is we have a slowed down medical process. They had their initial approvals, and then I think they did a second round, and they haven't really released any new licenses in almost 5 years. So what you've had multi-state operators or, conglomerates, as you speak of, purchasing other licenses from local small businesses because they've been, they've essentially been priced out. So it's hard to compete with the Curios, the Curaleafs, the True Leaves, these multi-state operators, for the mom and pop shop, like, with Marion May and Hope Wiseman. So the thought is, it's like, I know that Marion May is trying to get into other states, but it's a lot easier for a multi-state operator because they have the network. They have the network and they have the capital. So you're doing something different than a lot of people, right? You're not just taking the everyday angel investor. So explain to me the concept of what you're doing crowdfunding, and then like how you're crowdfunding differently, and more critically than other folks. Because I think that's interesting.
Definitely. So in 2017, when I started going off on my own, I had a product line for a set of dugouts and one-hitters that I wanted to create and design and manufacture. And in order to do that, I was going to have to raise funds. I am not a wealthy person. I've never in a year of my life have I qualified to be an accredited investor. And so if I was actually going to build this company, I was going to have to find investors. And I thought what was going on in cannabis was unfair until I started to learn how this whole thing works. Like, first of all, anybody can call themselves an investor, anybody. And you're out there trying to sell people one after another. And dipping my toe into the VC world and the types of questions I was asked, and the fact that I found people with money, but not people I want to work with, and definitely not people I want to answer to. And so, I was really dedicated to building a company with a diverse cap table. And so when I was like, do you know any Black investors? Do you know any female investors? The answer over and over again was no. And this goes back to what we started talking about at the beginning, is that these boards are just filled with finance dudes. And we know, there's never even been a female-owned bank, as far as I know, because I was looking for female-owned banks for a while. And like that, the finance world is almost worse than any other sector in terms of being, white male owned and led. And so it took me 2.5 years, and I had lots of people I trust, who were really honestly providing me what they believed was good advice, saying, Jane, you cannot be everything. You can't be the woman company that also takes all the money from diverse people, that also makes biodegradable packaging, that also, like, you got to just pick one. You can't do it all. And I was like, no, then why am I doing it?
Biodegradable, that you're ahead of the game. I've seen some of those products, so you're ahead of the game for that one.
Thank you. And so, it took a lot longer trying to sell VCs, but my cap table is 80% owned by women and people of color. My largest angel investor is Black. But after going through that and raising those funds, I really wanted a different option, because when you're trying to raise money and you're on that phone with that investor, that hour's gone if they don't invest in you. And I wanted a way to broadcast what I was doing, what I was building to a much larger audience. And so a year after doing the VC for a year straight, I started doing equity crowdfunding. And so in 2018, there was not a lot of people doing equity crowdfunding at all, let alone in cannabis. I was one of the very first. And it is challenging. And but I've learned a lot. And the things I've learned, like when I was learning a lot to sell the company to all those investors, that's not the same kind of learning as the steps I had to go through to actually sell equity in my company on an SEC and FINRA regulated site. And so it was basically like getting an MBA. Like you have to learn so much, but honestly, if you're not in it to win it, to actually sell a company someday with books that can be reviewed and audited, then you just have a passion project you're working on. And so I went through all those steps, and we have GAP compliant financials. We launched our first equity crowdfunding campaign in 2018. I did 2 more of them, one in 2020 and one last year in 2021. And from those 3 rounds, I raised $700,000 from 3,500 investors from 42 countries and every single U.S. state and territory. And hundreds of thousands of people have looked at my deal page, which has pictures of all of my products, all of the joints, all of the things. And there's not even a single place I can have everything about my brand out in the world right now. That really was such a massive brand builder for us, but also it allowed everyday people to invest in cannabis, and it allowed me to be able to find my people and find my audience. And we have another crowdfunding campaign going on right now. There's a lot of shake.
What's the link? We need the link.
We need the link. So you can just Google, I'll give you the link, but you can Google Mainvest, Jane West, and it'll take you right to it. I'm going to give you the link too, because I get like a few more percentage points if I refer people. But more importantly, I just want to address this. Equity crowdfunding is a way to truly, if you don't know, like when I started trying to raise money, people were like, oh, you're going to do a friends and family round. You're just going to, call your friends and family, and they'll write checks for like 10, 20K. And then that's your friends and family round. I was like, okay, what if I don't have those people? What's option B, right? And so equity crowdfunding gets to be your friends and family round when you're really a small business starting up and you don't quite have access to all that capital. I don't know anybody that went to Stanford. And so I just wanted to point out the importance of it, because right now on Mainvest, you'll see where people are finding their audience. So they are, there's Injaga is on there. That's a Black-owned Boston business. East Coasterdam has 5 days left in their campaign. Another locally owned business, Collexium out of Detroit. If you've never met LaToya or Rebecca yet, they're amazing. They're really building something pretty incredible in Detroit. And you'll see these cannabis businesses listed there. And Mainvest is truly one of the only locations that allows us to do that. When I did my first 3 rounds on Republic, I really had to kind of not say all the words, of exactly, these are accessories and home goods, but Mainvest has really embraced cannabis companies, and it's so great to see. And especially for people starting up businesses, you can go.
We're not shadow banning you. We're not shadow banning you.
No, right. Yes. So it's been really good, and you can really see how local cannabis businesses are finding their audience and able to raise funds in a manner that they control. Because here's what's happening everywhere else. Like, and why I'm so critical of anything that says social equity is that social equity is you give pieces of paper for major cultivation licenses that all the white guys have to everyone else. That's it. There's anything delaying someone being able to open up a large scale cultivation is a delay that's allowing everyone else to win, that's allowing everyone else to get first to market, that's allowing everyone else to get market share and get those first customers in their doors. Anything delaying that. And it, like, I'm seeing it happen over and over again. Oh, first we're going to start a fund, and then you'll have to go to an incubator where you learn from the white guys how to make the weed, and then you'll have to do this, and then you apply for the, and all it is delaying. And every week that goes by, you see the numbers ticking up, the billions of dollars worth of product that are being sold. And every day that they can delay any competition to the market, they are winning. And that's why, to me, I haven't seen social equity anywhere, because I'm not seeing, we know firsthand that those pieces of paper are instantly worth $5 to $10 million, depending on how manipulated the market is. So just give them out and let people get started. They'll find their investors. They don't actually need your fund and your other fund and your other fund, because quite honestly, I don't know anyone that's been paid from those funds yet. And they said the one in Illinois was going to fund all these new Black-owned businesses, and there's still none. Not one. Here we are 4 years later. And now they're telling the exact same story in New York and the exact same story in New Jersey. But when you actually look under the hood, you see that New York and New Jersey are already completely locked up by publicly traded multi-state operators who own all the cultivation. And they're going to fool people into thinking that just you get an opportunity with the breadcrumbs. You get an opportunity to open a retail shop.
With the micro.
Yeah.
A lot of them are pushing for the micro shops.
Right.
Cultivation, as we know, is the big money.
Right.
But one of the things that I was saying, and you hit on, was the fact that in Maryland there was a lot of licenses that were applied by people of color, but there weren't many approvals. There was very minute amount of approvals for people of color. So you spoke to it, and everybody check out Mainvest, learn how to invest in Jane and what she's doing. I knew that she was, she was big on making sure that this market, everyone had access not only to the market as a medical license owner or as a therapeutic user, but also, ownership.
Yes,
because,
ownership.
You want to create that generational wealth in the Black community, in the brown community, and from the women businesses and from the veterans. People who have been impacted the most and can benefit from the plan. And so, Jane, before you leave, of course, I can pick your brain all day, and I'm sure I'll ask you more questions as I, delve into, my venture into ownership. But one of the things that I wanted to say was, are you a Pepsi or Coke type of person?
Ginger ale.
Yes, you're good by me. That's one of my faves. My next question is favorite method of consumption.
Daily.
Daily, understood.
No, I like all the things. I like.
Often you like it to occur, but you know what I'm getting at there. But
rosin-based gummies. So
wow.
that, which I don't even know if you have in Maryland. They are more expensive to make, but they're the closest thing to the plant material. And it's not necessarily that you get more high. It's that it's so pure, and there's not like you'll just be able to tell once rosin.
I mean, I've used RSO and rosin, but I don't know if there's necessarily RSO or rosin gummies.
Yeah, we just started getting them in Colorado. They're all over California already, but like those are definitely my favorite. I love our mini joints. I think like about 0.35 grams of a pure bud is exactly what you need for smoking flower. And and then now vaping. I'm starting to get to vaping.
Those are the fast break ones. Those are the minis are the fast break ones.
Yes. And I'm starting to, so many moms that or people who are adverse to the smell of cannabis, which I am not, but that really are looking for quality vape. And so we're going to start introducing vape to market this year. So I started diving into vaping more, and yeah, that's a really great uptake, especially because it's such a rapid onset, but also fades pretty quickly too. And I think that's something that newbies want to be able to control until they get more comfortable with themselves.
I'm not a huge, I have an issue with the purity of vaping and, you know, what you're using as far as the CO2, but that's a whole longer conversation we could have. So what is your favorite strain?
Strain?
Yeah. And why?
I wouldn't say that because I try to avoid strain names because they don't mean anything. Okay, well, I built my business. I built my business on Durban poison for sure. But once I walked into the first like dispensary in 2014 and saw all the different strain names in jars, because before that, from your dealer, you know, it was kind of like something, but you weren't really sure. But when you can actually look at the terpene profile and know that this really is more like a landrace style sativa, like Durban poison is, then I just basically, for 2014 and 15, when I was running Women Grow and needed like so much energy, but also to be able to focus, I would just go into store after store and only pick their Durban poison, which honestly isn't even like that available anymore. So that would be my answer.
Okay. Hey, awesome. And, you know, Jane, thanks for joining us. Tell the people
how having me. What?
Tell the people how they can stay connected with you.
Oh, yes. Thank you for having me. You can go to janewest.com and there'll be a drop-down banner that'll take you right to our MainVest page where you can invest. That runs through the end of the summer, and we'd love to have you on board as one of our investors, whoever's out there listening. You can also go to MainVest and find out more about a lot of other awesome locally owned, minority owned cannabis businesses that are looking for funding that they can't find in the traditional VC world, and join them and invest in their companies.
Oh, awesome. You know, definitely check it out, Jane. I'll be talking with you soon. And of course, I'm always excited to see what you're doing. Don't forget, we have the ballot initiative coming up in November. So if I don't see you pushing the advocacy for Maryland for that, you know, people use, neither medical or therapeutic, but the people use, pushing it for the people use. But then after the fact, we're going to need to go to the legislature. So I hope there's giants like you that help us write letters and help testify in Annapolis to talk about what that framework should be. Because the thought is like, we've been at it for so long in the state of Maryland and discussing it. So hopefully we're a thought leader on getting it right.
Yep.
You know, so
I'm all for supporting your initiatives. I know you're here for all the right reasons. Like at the end of the day, less regulation is more. And hopefully, and you know, we know that the sky is not falling in Colorado. Home prices are up, less opioid deaths, less overall teenage use of illicit drugs. Bringing cannabis and dispensaries into your communities is a positive public health change. And so we should be doing everything possible to make sure that people in Maryland have access to that and can buy the product they want from the people they want to support.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Jane, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to all of the lovely people out there.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for making this important too. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yes. So we'll see you soon for the cannabis conference, the upcoming one. But thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Bye.
All right, guys, that was Jane West. Make sure you support Cannabis Boss, Cannabis Giant. And at the end of the day, she's a part of the ecosystem. So thank you. Have a good one. Welcome back. We got a brand new guest, also a fellow Bulldog. If you know anything about me, I'm a proud graduate of Bowie State University, the illustrious Bowie State, first HBCU in the state of Maryland. And so I have a fellow activist, organizer, and advocate, hailing from Bowie State. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Jackson.
Hi.
Hey, and so Armani, for people who don't know about you, give them your spiel, give them the short story, the Reader's Digest. Who are you? and why do you do what you do?
So I'm a senior at Bowie State, and I am a local activist. I do a lot of activism work in my community. I was a part of the NAACP Youth and College Division. I do local work with some of the local organizations in our county, in Anne Arundel County. And I just love doing activism work because I believe in freedom for all people and making sure that we're able to expand equity to all people in the community.
Sure. And, before we get into the great work that you do all the time, I don't remember exactly where I met you or why I met you. Do you remember how we met and what's our first interaction?
That was when I had spoke to, it was one of my classmates, Demetrius. He told me about it was like an event through Bowie. It was for Black History Month or something.
Was it the HBCU funding one, or was it that one?
HBCU funding, yeah. And y'all needed like an extra person to talk about HBCU funding, and I just stepped in because I normally do that for all of stuff that I do, because I'm just a big advocate for just anything that benefits the community, and especially with HBCU funding, we definitely desperately needed it, and I just knew that it was something that we needed to actually like expand on, because I know that we were talking about the settlement was coming up, or was about to be, finished or whatever. So
making the people aware, yes, yeah.
I just love the fact that you guys that there was an event to bring the awareness to it.
And I remember that now that you say that, because that was probably almost 2 years ago. Now that I think about it.
Oh, like time flies, and it's crazy.
Yeah. And Demetrius, the reason he recommended you is I remember I asked him, because he was a Bowie State student, and I was like, let me call on my current Bowie State people. I know I'm an alumni, but let me call on my current Bowie State people. And Demetrius is like, nah, I ain't doing it. Let me send you to the real activist, right?
Yeah.
So they give me your number, and I hit you up. It was like a cold call. It was literally a cold call. Like Demetrius said, you would participate in this event, and I don't think I knew you at the time, but it was a great event. It ended up being a great event. We had Democrats, we had independents, we had Republicans, so everybody was represented, and all of the Maryland HBCUs were pretty much represented. Students or faculty or alumni from those institutions. And it was big, as you said, to make sure that HBCUs in the state of Maryland, got adequate funding, because a lot of the PWIs, received disparity in funding. So the thought is like, it's about time that the HBCUs got more funding. Did we get everything we wanted? No. And it took way too long to get it.
Because let me tell you, that the other HBCUs, they be getting funding from all like the famous celebrities. The main ones is Howard, Spelman, Morehouse. But what about the rest of us?
You're right. Hey, you're right. I agree with you that the big ones, the Spelmans, the Morehouses, the Howards, they get love a lot of time. But Bowie State has been doing well in the last like 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Let's be honest, and the amount of money and amount of attention they've been able to gain. I will give President Bro, a props for that, because she seems to be a good steward in the community. Passing Bowie's name and growing the endowment of Bowie. So I have seen some great investments happen, in Bowie in the last few years.
Right.
Not to say that they can be Howard or Spelman, but
right.
Yeah.
They have their own problems too. So
yeah.
Right.
And so one of the things that I'll say is I remember one of the times I saw you most recently was at a brunch, an advocacy brunch. So one of the things I wanted to ask you was to better understand, what that brunch was for. Can you explain that to me? Because I know that you do a lot of work around police reform and the justice around, the way that police practice.
So the brunch was for the annual brunch that Reverend Marguerite Morris hosts for in honor of her daughter's death. It's for Kathy's sake. She had created an organization after her daughter. I think it was like the 5th or 6th year since she's had it. And this particular brunch that we had was in honor of those who participated in the Police Accountability Board rally that we had created back in March. And we were just talking about the importance of police accountability and trying to create a police accountability board in Anne Arundel County, because a lot of different counties are trying to create a police accountability board, and we wanted to get our county council to create one.
And I have seen a push for the police accountability board, especially being in Prince George's County. And as a community advocate and a stakeholder, do you feel that the PAB push, because this has been a conversation and things that advocates have been pushing for decades, but do you feel that the renewed push from the administration and some of the elected officials who weren't championing it before are because of events like George Floyd and what we saw a couple summers ago? And then subsequently, do you feel as though like the police accountability boards give citizens a real voice? Because I know some of these boards have too many police officers on the board, so how do you feel the Anne Arundel one is doing, and where was the spark for you guys there?
So
You got to take your time.
So I would say that I feel like it was kind of like a thing where it kind of got popular a little bit in terms of like people started to hear about it, and we were trying to amplify that issue that was going on, because the Police Accountability Board didn't really people didn't know that we were trying to create one, and other counties were, and I think people were just kind of like hopping on to trying to help. And I think in terms of just getting our county council to get our attention, we kind of got their ear, but we still didn't, and I think we still need to get a little bit more momentum into it.
What is the composition of your board, if you could explain that? If I could just
say it one more time.
What does the composition look like as far as like who does this board made up of? Are you
mostly community members, but also they include police as well, but they only have like a couple of them, but they want to make it community oriented in terms of trying to make sure that the community's voice is heard.
And, okay. And I mean, I'm just curious to see where it comes to fruition, because I feel that like even in Prince George's County, coming up with the board is something that you can champion and talk about, but like, how much of a voice, and power the members of that group actually have is, yet to be determined. But we like the direction it's going. We like that we're getting things like this, and people are wearing body cameras, and there's different bias trainings and things of that nature. But one of the things that I try to remind people is like Maryland is still the South, right? So like even though we are progressive-ish, we're still very conservative, especially in certain pockets of Maryland, right. and even sometimes amongst us people of color, right? I've seen many people of color, who somehow forget about Black issues, right? Because it doesn't affect them the same way, and it might affect someone, so yeah, that was just one of the things I was just throwing out there. Of course, a little side note.
And we're and the end result was that we didn't get what we wanted. As much as we advocated, we did 3 rallies in a span of like a month in March. So from the beginning of March, because they were still like I guess drafting and taking stuff out of that bill that we were advocating for, the Police Accountability Board bill. And each time that we would come for the rally, they was just chopping it up to the point to their own liking, because we only had 2 supporters out of that county council that sponsored the bill, and the rest of their peers decided to be just be very like resistant to the fact that we signed up to do testimonies. A lot of us went back about 3 to 4 times, and I guess some of us told stories, personal stories. Some of us were very vulnerable, told their background, why some of us should be on the police accountability board because they were trying to tear down the fact that if you had a criminal record, whether it was a misdemeanor or whatever it was, even if you did your time, they did not want you to be on the police accountability board. And some of the people that did testify were very vulnerable and even said that these are people that are pillars in our community, had let us know that yes, they made a mistake, but why should they have to be excluded from the police accountability board? And they still didn't care. They still was like, well, this doesn't matter, you don't matter. And it just seemed like, our county council didn't want to listen to us, regardless of the fact that we came back 4 times. And it just kind of showed like, their stance for humanity and racial equity and all those things. So yeah.
Well, I would say I applaud the work you guys are doing, and you're part of the NAACP down there, right? And under one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yes,
I've done a lot with NAACP.
Yeah.
You broke up a little bit. So I've done a lot with the NAACP over the past year, especially with their PAC of the Maryland State Conference and pushing their legislative agenda. So you were probably down in Annapolis, or you were listening to, I don't think it was last session, but the session before when they passed the police accountability bill, and people were on the call for hours. Like I think it was like a 13. It was something crazy. It was something like from like the morning to like the middle of the night testifying. Because I think by the time that I listened in or I testified, it was already 8-9 p.m. And the thought is like, if you remember what happened there, the legislators weakened the bill. The bill came out in like one of the weakest forms ever. And then, now they could say we passed police reform, but like it the bare minimum, like it sometimes it's frustrating, right? Sometimes it's frustrating.
It is very frustrating. And you see how like a lot of us activists, we put our heart and soul into getting people to know what's like, what's important to us, and yet our council members tend to just kind of like ignore what we're trying to advocate for. And it could be very frustrating because we're trying our best to try to make it better for all of us. And when you have people that are just blatantly ignoring us or just doesn't care, it just kind of gives you a little discouraged. But we do realize that the fight isn't over and the fight will always continue.
Yes, that is the word of the week, y'all. Now, the reason I say that is because like being an activist or being in public service is like, I think a good friend told me, it's like a girlfriend who would never love you. Right? So the thought is, it's like there's a lot of times where you put in all of your heart. There's a lot of times where you put in all of your energy, sometimes your own money, and you still get pooped on. Right. And the thought is like, that's okay. You're going to have your downsides. You're going to have your down moments. It's about what you do during that adversity and how you pick yourself up. Because as an advocate, most of the time when you advocate, you're not getting paid. They generally not paying you for your speeches or, paying you to picket, or giving you incentives down the line. A lot of this you're doing because, that's who you are as a person, and you love these issues. Right. So, I appreciate you and I applaud you for the work you're doing. And, if nobody else told you, I'm proud of you, young sister, for sure. I've seen you working in the community, not only in your community, but in at your school. So definitely, if nobody ever told you, I'm proud of you because it can be a thankless job to be, a public servant.
Honest with you. When I was doing that activism work, that was probably the hardest semester for me for school. So, and I had a lot of personal stuff going on at home. So while I was still fighting for something that was important to my community, I still had to turn in a 30-page paper and was dealing with personal stuff at home. So I would say that it's, like you said, it is a thankless job. And some people don't realize that it comes with a lot of like ebbs and flows, and it's just a lot of hard work that comes into play when you are an activist. And it's, like you said, it's a thankless job.
Exactly. But of course, I appreciate you, and I just want to ask you a couple quick questions before I get you out of here. One, Are you a Pepsi or Coke type of person?
Pepsi.
Gotcha. You froze there. I was gonna think of a diet. Is that diet Pepsi or something? I don't know. The second thing is favorite superhero and why.
I would say Black Panther because
Hey, Wakanda
he's
forever.
Black Panther for
And,
sure.
and I believe
Because
you.
like,
Man. I believe you on that. But some people say it just to be like cliche black, but like you're not cliche. It's like that's who you are. You know what I mean? Like I think I met you as Afro Armani. You know what I mean? So yeah, definitely.
yes.
Favorite quote and why?
It was a quote by Angela Davis. What was the quote? Give me 1 second. I have a quote. Hold up.
Yes, I think I have it.
Actually, I have it in my email.
It's in your bio. It's the one in your bio. I have it.
Oh,
If
it
you
is?
need it, if you need it, let me
You
know.
can read it. I forgot that
I
quick.
am no longer
Go ahead, you can read
accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. And Angela Davis, she would not stop at until justice and
Yep.
liberation is reachable in all institutions from education, health to criminal justice system, and many others. So there we go. I found your favorite one.
That's
Angela Davis quote.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to meet. I want to meet.
And the reason why I
No, I said I would love to meet Professor Davis one day. That's what I said.
Oh yeah, me too. Right. Yeah. And that quote is like my favorite because we do realize that like a lot of the stuff that we see in our country today is like we obviously we want to be able to change the things we cannot accept. Like, the overturning of Roe versus Wade. That's something, women's rights is a huge issue right now. And a lot of us women are just frustrated at the fact that something as basic as having our reproductive rights taken away is just it's horrifying. It's ridiculous to see that we're reverting back to such a conservative point in this country. So like the quote says, I'm changing things I cannot accept, and I will continue to do so. So,
hey, absolutely. I mean, and I appreciate that quote. I think we all need quotes that remind us why we do what we do and continue to motivate us. So I appreciate that quote. I look up to it might be Dr. Davis or Professor Davis. I look up to her very much, and she is an advocate and continues to advocate for Black and brown bodies. So with that being said, Armani, I don't want to hold you any longer. We have you're the last guest on this episode, and I hope people become engaged. I want to know, how can people connect with you? If they don't know you already, how can they connect with you?
I am on Instagram, Facebook. I call myself She Is Afro, and Afro stands for African Female Revolutionary Optimist. That's the theme of my of my page. But they can follow me on that handle that I use, that username. And also you can always see all of my community activist work that I do throughout the community. I'm pretty sure you'll see me popping up somewhere else soon. So
Yes, yeah, I mean, I'm sure of it. And the thought is continue doing the great work. Let me know, when the graduation is. I got to make sure to have some type of celebration for you of some extent. A young leader graduating, going on to the world. We want to make sure to give you a party. So definitely let me know when that happens or when that's coming.
That.
Yes. And so I appreciate you joining us, Armani. Peace, love, and revolutionary regards.
Amen.
Right, solidarity. All right, well, thank you. That was this week's episode of People Over Politics. We had 2 new guests, and of course, we had someone from my favorite school, BSU. And with that being said, we'll see you next week. Have a great one. Have a good 4th.